Hello guys, welcome to our new video on witch hunting. In this video, we will explore 7 shocking truths about some of history's darkest persecutions. These events show how fear led societies to act with great cruelty and injustice. We'll dive into the brutal torture methods used to extract confessions and the horrifying stereotypes that fueled mass paranoia. You'll learn how vulnerable groups like women and the elderly became the primary targets of these deadly accusations. We'll also uncover how fear turned communities against the accused, leading to tragic violence and executions. Stick around to the end, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more historical deep dives like this. 1. Mass persecutions and executions. Throughout history, fear of witchcraft has caused hysteria, leading to terrible persecutions and executions. Let's look at the dark details of the witch hunting era that took tens of thousands of lives over the centuries. Between the 15th and 18th centuries, many people were killed during the European witch craze, with estimates ranging from 40,000 to 60,000 executions for witchcraft. Most of those accused were women, often older, marginalized, or vulnerable individuals. They became scapegoats for society's fears. Women suffered the most during these persecutions, with over 75% of those accused being female. Misogyny and fear of the unknown led to many innocent women being targeted. They were often accused because they were healers, midwives, or simply because they were different. The worst hunts took place in West Central Europe, including parts of Switzerland, Germany, and France. These large trials often resulted in mass executions, with whole communities becoming victims of the panic. The period of terror ended by the late 17th century, as people became more skeptical and called for better standards of evidence in courts. However, the effects of these persecutions still leave a dark mark on human history. 2. The use of torture. Witch hunting in history included cruel torture to force confessions and fuel panic. Now, we look at the frightening methods used in these harsh trials. During the European witch craze, courts usually needed confessions or 2 witness statements to convict someone of witchcraft. However, it was difficult to find evidence for secretive crimes like witchcraft. This made torture a common way to get confessions and secure convictions. The goal was simple: force the accused to confess, regardless of the truth. Under intense pain, victims often confessed to strange and unlikely crimes, like attending witch gatherings, flying on broomsticks, or making deals with the devil. These forced confessions only increased paranoia. The methods of torture were as varied as they were brutal. Victims were stretched, crushed, or burned. Their fingernails were ripped out, or they were subjected to sleep deprivation, hunger, and psychological torment. The pain was unbearable, leaving most no choice but to confess. Once a confession was made, the situation continued to escalate. Victims were often pressured to name others involved friends, family, or neighbors. This caused a chain reaction, increasing panic and leading to more arrests, more torture, and more confessions. Torture was not merely a means of enforcing justice, it served as a weapon of control. It transformed fear into power, suppressing dissent and inciting mass hysteria. Despite its terrifying nature, it was fully sanctioned by the legal systems of the time. 3. Targeting the vulnerable. The witch hunts of the past did not just target bad people. They mainly harmed the most vulnerable members of society. Thirdly, we will look at how the weak and marginalized became the main victims of this dark period in history. Like I said earlier, during the European witch craze, most people accused of witchcraft were women. Over 75% of those accused were female, often older, poor, or socially isolated. These women were easy targets for blame, as a fearful society took advantage of their vulnerabilities. Women who worked as healers or midwives were often in danger. People misunderstood their knowledge of herbs and healing and saw it as a threat. Misogyny, superstition, and fear of the unknown made these women targets. Accusations were often personal. Disputes between neighbors or business rivals could lead to witchcraft charges. The people accused were usually those who had little social or financial power to defend themselves. Older women, especially widows or those without family, were often wrongly accused. Their age and lack of support made them easy targets in a society that needed someone to blame for problems like crop failures or illness. When these women were accused, they faced extremely difficult situations. Often, their confessions were forced through torture, making them admit to crimes they did not commit. Anyone who was different or vulnerable could become a victim of the hysteria. Social outcasts, the poor, and even those who tried to defend the accused faced suspicion and persecution. The witch hunts were not just about seeking justice, they targeted the most vulnerable people in society. These victims were accused of crimes, but they also lost their dignity, rights, and often their lives. 4 brutal testing methods. In the frightening world of witch hunting, accusations alone were not enough to prove someone guilty. To convict a person of witchcraft, communities used brutal and inhumane testing methods. Let's explore the terrible practices that were used to identify witches. One of the most well-known methods for testing accused witches was the swimming test. They would tie up the accused and throw them into a body of water. If they floated, people thought they were guilty, believing they rejected the water as pure. If they sank, they were considered innocent, but many drowned before anyone could save them. In parts of Africa during the 19th and early 20th centuries, another brutal method was used. Suspected witches were forced to drink poison. If they survived, they were declared innocent. If they died, their guilt was proven. It was a deadly lose-lose situation for the accused. Other methods involved physical torture to force confessions. In some communities, suspected witches were suspended upside down over fires, enduring unbearable heat and smoke until they admitted guilt if they survived long enough to do so. These tests were made to ensure that people would be convicted. They were not about justice. Instead, they aimed to create fear and stop people from speaking out. The accused were often chosen because of personal grudges or their vulnerable social status, leaving them trapped in a system that was meant to ruin them. In many cases, these harsh tests turned into public events. Whole communities gathered to watch, believing that finding witches would protect them from bad luck. But the true cost was the loss of many innocent lives. These harsh and unfair tests show the dangers of fear and superstition. They turned neighbors into enemies and made communities places of suffering. 5. Demonization and dehumanization. The witch hunts of history weren't just about accusations. They were driven by the systematic demonization and dehumanization of the accused. Let's explore how these chilling narratives fueled centuries of persecution. In the Middle Ages, people viewed witches as very different from ordinary individuals. They believed witches were working for the devil. This view was not random. Religious and societal leaders carefully shaped it. The infamous Malleus Maleficarum, written in 1487, played a key role in shaping the image of the witch as a malevolent, devil-worshipping figure. Witches were described as making pacts with demons, performing harmful magic, and engaging in grotesque acts like infanticide and cannibalism. One common stereotype about witches was the idea of their secret gatherings, known as the Witches' Sabbath. People believed these events involved naked celebrations, rituals to worship the devil, and terrible acts of disrespect. Although these ideas were completely false, they dehumanized those accused and helped justify their punishment. People viewed witches as outsiders because they were linked to the devil. Society saw witches as enemies of both humanity and God. This made it easier for people to take away their rights and their lives. Judges and inquisitors used stereotypes to create fear. Even people like the Italian Benedettists, who claimed to use magic for good, were accused of working with Satan. They deliberately blurred the line between harmless practices and heresy. The church enforced a clear divide by comparing witches to saints. It saw miracles as acts of divine power, while it labeled magic as demonic. This black and white view did not allow for any nuance or understanding. Society turned the accused into monsters by demonizing and dehumanizing them, making it easier to justify the terrible punishments they faced. These people were seen as unworthy of empathy or justice. 6. Children accused of witchcraft. When we think of witch hunting, we often picture adult women. However, a very sad part of this history is the children who were accused of witchcraft. Let's reveal the tragic stories of these young victims. In historical Europe, children were rarely accused of witchcraft. However, in some parts of Africa today, the situation has changed dramatically. In regions like Central and West Africa, children are often accused of witchcraft. Pentecostal Christianity has led to claims that everyone can be witches, and children are no exception. Some preachers say children are to blame for family problems, illnesses, or poverty. This blame sometimes happens for money, as families pay for exorcisms or healing ceremonies. Children accused of witchcraft often suffer terrible consequences. Many are abandoned by their families and thrown out of their homes. They may face serious physical and emotional abuse. In the worst cases, they are tortured or even killed. Some communities have built shelters to protect these children, but the stigma still exists. Once someone is accused, it can be very hard for them to rejoin society. This leaves them vulnerable and isolated for life. These accusations often relate to bigger social issues. City growth, economic struggles, and diseases like HIV/AIDS create situations where fear and superstition can grow. In these environments, vulnerable children become easy targets. Even with the challenges faced, there is still hope. Activists, NGOs, and community leaders are working hard to fight these accusations, protect children, and teach communities about the damage caused by these beliefs. 7. Mob justice and execution. Witch hunting was not just something that happened in courts or official trials. Throughout history, mob justice became a terrifying reality, taking the lives of many innocent people. Let's explore the harsh truth about witch hunting done by everyday people. Accusations of witchcraft often caused widespread panic, and communities often took justice into their own hands. This mob justice ignored any legal process, resulting in quick and deadly outcomes. In 1075, in Cologne, citizens threw a suspected witch from the city wall. Similarly, in 1128, in Ghent, an alleged sorceress was disemboweled by townsfolk. These acts of mob justice weren't anomalies. They reflected the widespread fear and frenzy surrounding witchcraft. Without trials or evidence, mobs carried out executions in the most brutal ways imaginable. Suspects were burned alive, drowned, or hanged, sometimes simply because they were different, isolated, or accused by a powerful community member. Acts of mob justice often arise from personal grudges or social tensions. People may use accusations to settle disputes, eliminate rivals, or punish those who don't follow societal norms. The violence did not stop after one execution. Fear created more fear, and one accusation often led to another. Whole communities could become trapped in a cycle of suspicion and violence. The history of mob justice during the witch hunts shows us how fear and misinformation can lead to violence. The harmful effects of community panic still serve as a strong warning today. Thank you for joining us as we uncovered the terrifying truths about witch hunting and its dark legacy. If you found this video insightful, give it a like and share it with others who love history. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories from the past. Bye-bye.